Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reviewing a video on Piers Morgan's channel. And this is a debate between Piers Morgan and Mohammed Hijab. And Mohammed Hijab is an intellectual who is supporting Palestine right now. And as my longtime viewers know, that on this channel we support Palestine, free Palestine. And the reason I chose this specific debate was because of the fact that it's very, very, very clear that Piers Morgan is controlled by the Zionists, is owned by the Zionists, given a few of his actions in this video, and given really how I think he damaged his credibility here. And so I would encourage you not only to watch this video yourself and analyze it and critique it, but also watch his other commentary, other videos on the current Palestine conflict in order to see what I'm talking about here. And the reason I think it's important for me in particular to go over this video is because I have a doctorate in industrial and organizational psychology, and both my master's degree, my master's thesis and my doctoral dissertation were on understanding and analyzing personality. And so I think I'm a pretty good person to analyze, to decipher the meaning behind the words of these two individuals. So let's dive right in and see what is being said in this interview. I did speed it up a little bit just because of the fact that we have 22 minutes to go over, and I'm going to be providing commentary, so this could be a little bit of a long video. So let's see what they have to say here.
About last week, going to be the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro on the crisis in Israel. This powerful emotional analysis made headlines around the world. 5 million people have watched that interview so far, a measure of the enormous emotion and division this conflict has awoken. Well, among those viewers was Mohammed Hijab, the controversial pro-Palestine influencer with nearly a million YouTube.
Okay, so let's start off here. When he was describing Ben Shapiro, who is pro-Israel, he did not call him controversial, even though Ben Shapiro is a very clearly controversial person. However, Mohammed Hijab, he comes in right away and says how Mohammed Hijab is a controversial person. And so the thing is, if you are a person who is undecided about Mohammed Hijab, maybe you've never heard of him, then calling him controversial immediately would make you averse to thinking about him and to taking his side, because you're like, oh, he's controversial, I can't believe in him, I can't agree with him. And so that's a way of framing the situation in order to really be disparaging to Mohammed Hijab. And so Piers Morgan is coming right out the gate and being, I feel, unfair to his guest. And let's see what Mohammed Hijab has to say about this.
Described of his own. Here's what he had to say about it.
You think Piers Morgan, on fair grounds, would try and speak to me about an issue like this? Or Ben Shapiro, when they know what I'm going to come with? Absolutely not. Don't pretend you don't know who I am. You've been watching my videos. You know what I'm about. Your silence is deafening. And your cowardice is apparent.
Well, Mohammed Hijab joins me now. Mohammed, thank you very much for coming in. I hadn't actually watched your videos. I have now. I've watched a few of them. I'm aware you've got a massive following. You've got nearly 1 million YouTube subscribers. You're an influential person, and you have a lot to say about this issue, obviously. Well, thank you for coming in, but I'm not too cowardly to talk to you. I don't have a horse in this race. I think I've tried to straddle a divide of being fair-minded with all sides. I've had all voices.
Okay, so I have watched this video in its entirety, and I don't think he's being fair at all, and there's a few examples of that we're going to get into. But yeah, him calling himself fair and balanced on this issue is just not true. So let's see.
This is on the show.
I commend you for that, actually, to be honest, for bringing me on. But do realize I did caveat that with on fair grounds. So let's hope that this interview is conducted.
I intend to be completely fair.
Yeah, sure.
I promise you, because all I want to get to here is...
Well, okay, so right off the bat, it's not on fair grounds, because he started off framing it for viewers that Mohammed Hijab is a controversial figure. So really, Piers Morgan is not off to a good start here.
The real sense of what is going to happen. We can all look back at... We can all look back...
Before-
Let me just... We can all look
Before
back...
that, Piers,
Yeah.
sorry, if you want to say fair grounds, you introduced me as a Palestinian controversial.
I actually corrected myself.
Right, so
I said pro-Palestinian. I meant to say
so
pro-Palestinian.
why did the word controversial come into play?
I think you're controversial.
So are you.
Yeah, I wouldn't...
So is the ambassador. Why didn't you introduce her in that manner?
I'm happy to say that to many people, her views would be controversial.
So why didn't you introduce me as the Oxford graduate?
Do you want to be introduced as that?
Yes.
Okay, or an Oxford graduate.
Go ahead.
See, and that's true as well. I understand that the fact that I have a doctorate is persuasive to people, but if you introduce me as that controversial YouTuber Joe Ligato, I'm going to be pretty offended. You don't have to obviously call me Dr. Ligato in day-to-day speak, but if your way of framing me to other people is disparaging, it's definitely an attack on your character to start off with. So not a good way to start a debate. And as Mohammed Hijab says here is, yeah, call him an Oxford graduate. I mean, it's a matter of respect. Sure, you don't have to, every time you talk to him, say, this is the Oxford graduate Mohammed Hijab, but if you're going to introduce him to an audience, yes, you should try to be as respectful as possible. So not a good start from Piers Morgan here.
Okay, no problem. You can be introduced as anything you like, Frank. It makes no difference to the debate. Let me ask you this: where were you when you heard about what happened?
I hate to harp on this, but it does make a difference for the debate, and I think that Piers Morgan has enough of a background to know that it does make a difference for the debate here. I mean, Mohammed Hijab didn't come in and introduce Piers Morgan as this is Piers Morgan, the absolutely incompetent ignoramus. Like, it's obvious that when you frame a person in a negative light, it's gonna influence the debate. So bad Piers Morgan.
On October the 7th.
I was at home.
What was your reaction when you heard?
I was actually very sickened by it. And this is something I do want to put on the table because I think it's fair for people to know this. In our religion, we do not believe, okay, as a Muslim, I am a Muslim, and I do not believe in the killing of any man, woman, or children, non-combatants. That is not despite the religious teachings. That is because of the religious teaching. So in terms of condemning Hamas and just jumping straight into it, I condemn not only Hamas, but any other entity, okay, wherein it's proven that this has been done, that the killing of combatants has been done. Therein, I condemn any party that does it. Any party that kills people or strikes at people where it's more probable than not that it will hit a civilian target, I condemn them. And that's why I condemn the IDF. Because when they strike, they know that it's more probably than not going to hit civilian targets. They know that.
And the thing is, the West has been so disparaging of Russia in terms of how they're conducting their war that it's just absurd that they're allowing Israel to get away with what it's getting away with. I mean, Russia attacked some power plants in order to make sure that the Ukrainian military couldn't use electricity to, they had more difficulty logistically. But in this war, in this conflict, Israel has completely cut off all electricity intentionally to civilians, and they've cut off food and water, and the West is just completely silent. So how can you be upset that Russia is attacking infrastructure that is used by Ukrainian military and not directly targeting civilians, whereas Israel is taking away food, water, electricity, internet access, and they are attacking targets that are directly civilian in nature. And I believe I've read some statistics that more civilians have directly died from Israeli airstrikes than from Russian airstrikes in the entire Ukrainian war that's been going on for over a year. So just heinous acts by Israel being conducted, and the West is just completely silent. I would say actually worse than silent. They are completely in support of Israel. And so you're really saying across the board on multiple different occasions that you can't trust the United States to be fair and balanced. You can't trust them to keep their word. There's no real rules-based order there where they can just change their mind about what is allowed and what isn't allowed depending on if it's an ally or not. And so really persuasive arguments by Mohammed Hijab so far.
That the majority of civilians, or the majority of people that are going to be affected are civilians. We know that from the various operations that have been conducted. We know that because now in Gaza you find that there is a blockade, as you know, for 17 years, but also they're stopping them from electricity, water, which is a war crime under Geneva 4 of the Geneva Convention, Protocol 4 of the...
Okay, so this isn't just like an exaggeration. Military officials, government officials within Israel have come out and said that they are cutting off the water and food to Gaza. And that is abundantly clear that that is a war crime. It wasn't fake. It wasn't indirect sources. They are cutting off the food and water. The water and food are cut off right now, okay, in Gaza. Those are war crimes. These are people who should be tried in international court for war crimes. And the West is supporting them. No matter what you think of Hamas at that point, war crimes are being committed against a civilian population. They are being overtly committed. It's not just something that's there's plausible deniability. They're hiding the fact. They're not even pretending it didn't happen. They are coming right out on Twitter and saying that these war crimes are happening, and the West is supporting them.
Geneva Convention. So this is something I'm surprised you didn't actually mention to the ambassador.
I did mention.
You didn't say it's a war crime.
Well, I think it's an arguable point, but it's a war crime.
Okay, I'm asking now.
They are saying, at the moment, Israel is adamant they are not breaching war crimes. Right? It will be determined. It will be determined whether that's the case.
No, sorry.
What is it?
Okay, so I don't understand what Piers Morgan's argument here is, because they came out on Twitter and said they were going to be committing war crimes. Cutting off food and water are war crimes by definition. This is not something where it's a fuzzy gray area. Like, even if they had done it and refused and said no, they didn't do it, like even if they were outright gaslighting you, that would have allowed Piers Morgan to say what he's saying right now. But the fact that they came out on Twitter and said they were committing these war crimes, that it's self-evident that war crimes have been committed. They've admitted, Israel has admitted to it.
Mohammed, let me just make you back on that. I think surely we can agree that what happened on October the 7th was a war crime. I mean, when people are taking...
Okay, it's just ridiculous saying that you have to admit it's a war crime here. And Muhammad does admit it's a war crime. But like the thing is, under international law, if you are a captive population, you're under hostile occupation, you are allowed to use various means to resist that occupation. Okay, and so this is completely legal under international law. And as we've come to find out, that all of the stories that came out of the conflict on the Israeli side have been complete fabrications. The 40 beheaded babies, that was a complete lie. The journalists, various media outlets have supported that lie, even though there was no evidence for it. It came from Israeli sources that had no evidence to back it up. I've talked about in other videos how they came out with propaganda saying that Hamas is supported by Al-Qaeda, creating chemical weapons. It was actually a lie. It was a book cover that they brought out. It was in English, so obviously it wasn't Hamas that had this book cover. They've done incredible things, just really ridiculous, what has been going on with the lies that Israel is spewing about what happened with Hamas. They came out with a video where it was in Arabic, I believe, and they said that this video was saying that this person's not a prisoner, they are for raping. And it turned out that it was a complete obvious mistranslation of Arabic. And actually they were saying that this person's too young, we can't take them as a hostage, things like that. So like you're saying that Israel actually can come up with really no evidence that Hamas committed war crimes during their invasion, during their resistance of the Israeli occupation. Even the party goers that were supposedly killed, like massacred by Hamas, it turns out that there were people with weapons in the crowd. And so actually it was Israeli police, law enforcement, military officials, whoever it was, that had weapons who were using the crowd essentially as human shields. It's debatable whether it was intentional or not, but they were hiding amongst the civilians. And so it was actually the Israelis who were, again, committing war crimes by hiding amongst civilians. Again, in the heat of the moment, you could hide amongst civilians in order to like protect them. You have people with weaponry to try to protect them. But at the end of the day, that is crossfire. That isn't Hamas directly targeting civilians. It's that there are people with guns in between civilians, and so you just have crossfire there. And so all of the supposed war crimes that Hamas has committed, and again, I'm not actually a supporter of Hamas at all. They fought against the Syrian government of President Assad, and I'm a big supporter of President Assad. And so I'm not the biggest fan of Hamas, but every war crime that Israel has accused Hamas of has been a lie in one way, shape, or form. And so here, Piers Morgan saying this about condemning October 7th, that's what's there to condemn at this point? Because we don't have any factual information from Israel. All they can apparently do is lie.
Grandmothers and executing them, kidnapping young children when they're killing babies in their crib.
Okay, so there's increasing evidence that Hamas has tried to release prisoners, and Israel does not want to get some of the prisoners back. On top of that, they're refusing to open up humanitarian corridors, which would allow a prisoner exchange, things like that to occur. Hamas would release some of the prisoners if those humanitarian corridors would occur. And so there's a number of things going on here that are just not particularly true. There's no evidence of it. There's actually one person who said that a lot of the Israeli civilians that were killed were actually killed by Israeli defense forces because of the fact that the Israeli defense forces they were not coordinated, and they were just killing people randomly because they didn't know who to shoot at. And so that was actually an Israeli citizen that said that. And yeah, there's a lot of evidence that essentially nothing that's being said by Piers Morgan here is true.
We can agree that's war crime, right?
Okay, babies. Surely, of course, 100%.
Right.
But babies in the crib. Sorry, what's the evidence for that?
You don't believe that happened?
Sorry, CNN, the White House, Sky News, which you work for, all say.
Yeah, so this is heinous, where Joe Biden, the president, current president of the United States, said he saw pictures of beheaded babies, and it turns out that that was a complete fabrication. He never saw those pictures. There's no evidence of it. All these various media outlets are running with these stories. There's no evidence of it whatsoever.
I don't work at Guardian.
Well, you're
I did work at CNN. I saw one reporter who retracted it because she wasn't sure about the source.
It's unconfirmed by the White House.
But then the Daily Telegraph.
And I've heard this numerous times now, where it's like, whenever you ask them for evidence of these crimes, and they're saying, well, maybe it wasn't 40, but I mean, you have to condemn the murder of children. It's like, well, what if there was zero? What if this story was entirely made up? And for some reason, these people cannot get their head around the story can be completely made up. They're saying that if it wasn't 40, if that number was exaggerated, it must have been at least some, because why would they make up this story? But as far as anyone can tell, it was a completely made up story.
And the Jerusalem Post and other sources then did publish pictures, which indisputably show babies have been killed.
No, it showed one baby who's been charred, and that picture has been put up on Twitter and has been refuted by many people saying that it's actually AI.
That's completely untrue.
That is true. What's your source?
Okay, so that is true. People like Ben Shapiro said there was this charred baby, and that's the only evidence that they could find, and it looked incredibly fabricated. I've worked with artificial intelligence images, and it looked like an artificial intelligence image, and so I don't find that to be particularly trustworthy. There's another picture being shown that it was actually a dog, and they replaced the dog with a charred remains that were artificially created, and that actually seemed pretty legitimate. If you look at the picture of the dog, it does look like it was the original picture. And so, I mean, there's just really not good evidence of what Israel is saying. Meanwhile, you have video evidence on the ground by a ton of people in Gaza who are facing war crimes, who are facing genocide due to the Israeli military.
There's been a thorough investigation into the claim that was put up there by some rogue person on Twitter that it was AI. It has been completely disproven.
Okay,
that picture, which was published on the Telegraph.
It has not been completely disproven. I mean, it's actually really hard in modern times to prove or disprove pictures, video evidence, things like that, just because of how artificial intelligence works. But saying it's been completely disproven, that's not how AI generated images work. I think there are some instances where you could completely disprove an AI image if it's like really bad, but you can't actually prove an image isn't fake at this point, you can't prove whether something is real or not at this point if it's really well done. That's what I'm trying to say.
What's your source?
Is a genuine, legitimate picture.
What's your source?
Are you seriously arguing that babies weren't killed?
No, I didn't say that.
What are you saying?
I'm saying, give me a source.
Yeah.
You know for what?
So actually, the numbers did come out, and in the 0 to 3 years age range, there were 0 kills. And this is by Israeli sources saying that babies were not killed whatsoever, not even in the crossfire. There were some people who were 4 to 18 years of age who were killed, and that was in crossfire, so it's hard to say whether they were directly killed by Hamas or not. But actually, by Israel's own numbers of the people documented who died in their initial Hamas invasion of Israeli land, in that initial attack, there were 0 babies dead in the age range of 0 to 3. So what Piers Morgan is saying here has been contradicted by both Palestinian sources and by Israeli sources of documented deaths. So yes, there were 0 babies that were killed.
Well, you've been fired from the Daily Mirror for fake images. So you know full well about that.
I didn't accept it were fake.
Exactly. The UK government did.
Yeah, they did. Because the UK government, just to be clear,
Sure.
had waged, in my view, an illegal war in Iraq.
So you're allowed to go against the government, and I'm not allowed to go against the government.
Of course you're allowed to.
So tell me now what's the
You
source?
seem to be making a lot of presumptions about me, Mohammed.
Yes, it's a softball question
I was
for
the
your
editor.
ambassador of
No, they weren't. I put all the questions to the ambassador. I was editor of the Daily Mirror when we opposed the Iraq war on the grounds that I believed it was an illegal war. I still believe that to this day. I think it's the same in this country.
Fantastic.
I don't think you even knew that.
I didn't know that.
Right.
But that's not the point I was making. I was making the point that if you're allowed to go against the government in their classification.
So it's weird that he says that Muhammad Hijab didn't know that, because Muhammad Hijab talked about that just like a few seconds ago. So I don't know if Piers Morgan is suffering from memory loss here, but Muhammad Hijab was directly talking about that earlier. So weird commentary from Piers Morgan here.
Of an image, then if you have pro-Palestinian activists who are saying, actually, we need to see a source, shouldn't they be entitled to
The
that?
Daily Telegraph published on page 3.
Should they be entitled to that?
The Daily Telegraph said they had independently verified the picture, Mohammed.
No, excuse me.
If you're saying that their verification is wrong.
No, excuse me. Primary source in academia, I know you've done a journalism degree, which is...
Yeah, it's very clear here that Piers Morgan does not understand what a primary source is. Having the media say, like, yeah, we think this is legit, that's not a primary source. So, like, it's weird what Piers Morgan is saying here.
Frankly, it's not relevant to what we're talking about here anyway.
Probably is to journalism, yeah.
No, it's not to this conflict, but we academics require primary source evidence in order to make it.
The Daily Telegraph said they verified the picture.
That's a secondary source.
You may say
that's a secondary source.
Well, you may say you don't think it's genuine. I don't agree with you. But the wider point.
That was my point. I said I want a source. I want to see the
what we're arguing about here. You're not contesting that babies were killed.
No, I'm saying I want to see the
So
evidence.
why are you picking on the semantics of the Rusty One picture, which has been verified by British journalists? Why are you picking on that?
British journalists
Some
are not
example of
authority.
somehow this wasn't as bad as it seems.
British journalists are not an academic authority. You know that full well. You've been fired from Daily Mirror for that very purpose. What I'm saying to you is this: putting this issue to the side, I think you're trying to use as a red herring to move away from the.
What red herring?
This is a red herring because already 1,023 children have been killed in Gaza. That's why. And you didn't ask the ambassador that question.
I literally asked the ambassador. I said 3,000 people have already been killed in a week in Gaza.
Well, you didn't ask her.
Did you even listen to my interview with the ambassador?
I did listen, but excuse me.
Well, don't put words in my mouth. Or say I didn't ask a question.
Hold on, ask a question. Do you condemn the killing of those children by the IDF?
I tell you what I condemn.
Yes or no?
I'm going to answer your.
See, okay, so the completely imaginary children that Hamas supposedly killed of Israel, Muhammad was clear that he condemns that if it actually happened. but he doesn't see any evidence that it actually happened, and there is no evidence that it actually happened. Now Muhammad is saying, do you condemn the murder of Palestinian children? And I just want to go back to this because watch this. Piers Morgan refuses to condemn the murder of Palestinian children.
Did you even listen to my interview with the ambassador?
I did listen, but excuse me.
Well, don't put words in my mouth. Or say I didn't ask a question.
Hold on, ask a question. Do you condemn the killing of those children by the IDF?
I tell you what I condemn.
Yes or no?
I'm going to answer your
See? Refuses to come out and condemn the murder of Palestinian children. So when Piers Morgan says here that he's fair and balanced, that he doesn't have a stake in this, it's very clear that he actually does, and he's clearly a Zionist. He explicitly said here he refused to answer a yes or no question about whether he condemns the murder of Palestinian children.
question, honestly and truthfully.
Sure.
And I tweeted about this, right?
Okay.
I think that what happened on October the 7th was one of the worst atrocities I have ever had to read about or watch on.
It happens every day in Palestine.
No,
So why do you care about
it
that?
actually doesn't. It doesn't.
It does,
No,
actually,
no. The Israeli forces.
I've got the stats for that.
Israeli forces do not go.
That's the thing, where if you look at the stats for murders of Palestinians and murders of Israelis over the past couple decades, that type of thing happens all the time in Palestine. It does not happen in Israel.
Wait a minute, Mohammed. Israeli forces don't go into Gaza on one day and grab grandmothers and kill babies in their beds.
Okay.
And
They do. Yeah, actually, there's like a shirt going around in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, of one bullet, 2 kills, and it's like a picture of a pregnant Palestinian woman. And so, just heinous acts, and that's what Israel does.
No, hold on.
rape and abuse women.
Rape, is there any evidence of that?
It's been multiple reports in multiple mainstream media publications. Well, you have to say you deny it.
So again, Piers Morgan has no understanding about what is considered actual evidence to support something or not, because these accounts of rape occurring, they're not primary sources. There is really no evidence at this point that Hamas committed rapes when they attacked Israel.
No, I'm not denying anything.
You are.
No, I accept that some civilians have been killed. I do accept this. And I already said
You
that.
don't believe any of the reports that women were
No, I
raped?
didn't say that. I said that it's still...
But do you think they were raped?
No, I don't know. It's like the Russell Brand thing. You said you don't know any evidence. So why'd you apply...
Okay, so this is an excellent, this is an excellent point by Muhammad Hijab here, where Piers Morgan, in other circumstances, has said you do not accept a rape allegation until you see the evidence and until the person is actually convicted of the rape allegation. Okay? And so what Muhammad Hijab is saying here is, I want to see the evidence of these rape allegations against Hamas before I declare them to be true and that they have committed rape. And so if Piers Morgan was a genuine person, a competent person with 2 brain cells to rub together, then he would go, oh, actually, yes, in other contexts, I do want evidence of rape allegations before I accept that rape had actually occurred. Instead, Piers Morgan is a moron.
to
I'm not.
defendants.
Okay,
Okay,
it's
so
been reported.
when it's Israel, we know the rape. When it's Russell Brand, you don't know because you're
No, it's been reported by legitimate news
When it's
sources.
Israel, you
I
know the
believe-
rape. But when
I
it's Russell
believe
Brand, you don't
by
know.
them.
When it's Russell Brand, you don't know the rape.
So sitting here and saying that it's been reported by legitimate news sources, how is that actual evidence for rape? It's not evidence for rape. So it's just so weird. It's like if you have a newspaper coming out and with a rape allegation against someone like Russell Brand, apparently under Piers Morgan's own notions of how rape is proven or disproven, that would be enough. Just the fact that it was published in the New York Times or something like that. And so this is just, if you have any understanding about how to debate, if you have any understanding about how to form ideas about what's true and what's false, you could clearly see here that Piers Morgan has either no idea what he's talking about or he's just bought and paid for a Zionist.
Comparison between Russell Brand and what's happening.
It's the same thing. It's a rape allegation. Why are you stuttering?
I'm not stuttering.
You are stuttering. You don't have
You're
anything to say.
contesting every single thing that I'm saying.
Yeah, that's
and I'm
the
saying
point
to
of
you, at the end, 1,300 people.
Yeah.
I love that point there. You're contesting everything I say. Yes, because everything you say is a lie. And so that's the point of a debate here. If you're lying about everything, as Piers Morgan is very clearly lying about everything here, and we have the evidence to show this, even like we were talking about earlier about the babies being murdered, Israel owned sources, they've come up with 0 babies between the ages of 0 and 3. And that's the age range for babies. There are 0 that were killed during the Hamas attack. So just shocking. Yes, Piers Morgan, you are being refuted in every possible circumstance, and it's because you're wrong. You're either completely lying or you're completely incompetent. Probably both, just given how this interview is going right now.
Yeah,
Well, brutally
2,000 people have
murdered,
been killed on the other side.
abused,
2,000 people have been killed on
I
the
said
other
that to
side.
the ambassador.
Okay, but do you condemn that? Yes or no?
I don't think
So you refuse to condemn.
No,
You do refuse to condemn.
Okay, so this is the second time Muhammad brought this up, where he's like, I condemned Hamas murdering innocents if it actually happened, which there's no proof for. There is a ton of proof right now that Israel is killing civilians. And Muhammad, for the second time, asks Piers Morgan, do you condemn Palestinian children dying? And he just refuses to answer. Refuses.
You're putting words in my mouth.
You're not condemning, are you?
What do you want me to condemn?
Okay, excellent. What do I want you to condemn?
Yes.
I want you to condemn the fact that the IDF, knowing that it's more probable than not, pressing buttons from the sky, killing innocent civilians, 1,000 of them children, that is a war crime and that is not acceptable morally. Just like condemn the other one. Is it condemnable?
I believe, given the scale of what Hamas did on October the 7th, Israel is entitled to
kill
defend.
children.
No, that's not what I said.
Go ahead.
They're entitled to defend themselves with force.
Okay,
then the question becomes,
Okay, so just refuses to condemn the killing of Palestinian children. So just horrific. I know I've said this a number of times during this video so far, but it's just shocking that he can at least like condemn it, and if he really does want Palestinian children murdered, just like have your fingers crossed or something. Like, it just heinous that he's willing to put this in a recording, that he's like either ambivalent or like just pro the death of Palestinian children, because he's just not willing to condemn it right now.
there's an interesting debate.
Sure.
If, as it seems to me, you believe too, Hamas are not a force for good. You believe that?
Well, I think that anybody who kills children and those elements of Hamas who are killing children.
Right, so we can agree. So we agree. So my point is,
point.
if Israel's purpose is to rid the world of Hamas after the atrocity of October the 7th, how do they do that, given that Hamas embeds itself in civilian areas in the way that it does? Everyone knows that in Gaza.
Okay.
How do they do that?
Okay, so just a complete misinterpretation of reality. Gaza is one of the most population-dense areas of the world because it is an open-air prison. And so, yeah, Hamas is amongst civilians because of the fact that there is nowhere else they can go. They're stuck there. And so to say they're embedding themselves amongst civilians, where else are they going to go? Ridiculous.
In the surgically clean way that you seem to think you should be doing.
Okay, can I say,
have you not killed civilians?
Beautiful.
I don't like any civilian death.
Do you mind if I answer
I don't endorse it.
Okay, so here we go again. Well, what do you think about the Ukraine situation, the special military operation in Ukraine then? Because Russia has managed to target Ukrainian military without targeting very many civilians. Again, Israel has killed more Palestinian civilians than Russia has killed in the entire Russian-Ukrainian special military operation. And so why is Russia able to do that? And they're accused of war crimes, but Israel is killing far more innocents, and they're not being accused of war crimes, at least under Piers Morgan's interpretation of events.
Any civilian death.
Well, no,
Do I
don't condemn it, though.
Hang on.
Yeah.
No, and here's why. Because I support Israel's right to defend itself.
Beautiful.
Now,
Can I say
no,
something?
one more point, then you can reply.
Sure.
But
Okay, so he just flat out said he does not condemn the Palestinian children's dying because he thinks that Israel has a right to defend themselves, apparently in this way that they're currently going about it.
the question then becomes, what is proportionate?
Okay.
What is a proportionate response?
Okay.
I don't have the answer.
Excellent.
Because I don't know what a proportionate response to 1,300 murders is. When 260 young people at a music festival, most of them peace-loving people enjoying themselves at a festival, when they get slaughtered by people
Is there any
paragliding
evidence
in with machine
So there is video evidence, as I've talked about earlier, there is video evidence of people with weaponry amongst the partygoers. And so if you put them in the crossfire, what are people supposed to do? It's against international law to use people as human shields. Whether it was intentional or not, it seemed like Israelis with weaponry were using them as human shields. And I personally lean on the side that it actually wasn't intentional in this case, just because, again, if you're a civilian and there's people shooting, you go to people on your side that have weaponry to defend you. And what ended up happening was they ended up getting in the crossfire. I believe, from the video sources I've seen, they got in the crossfire because they were standing with people with weaponry amongst them.
guns. I don't know what the proportionate response
Okay,
is.
same response.
So can you tell me?
You've spoken for about 2 minutes. You didn't do that with the ambassador, by the way. I'm just showing you're saying fair, but you're not being fair.
I've
Okay,
spoken
so let me paint.
I will be fair.
Sure.
I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say.
Excellent. You're from Irish descent. You know that there was an IRA in Belfast and so on. Okay, so let me ask you a question now. If there was IRA in Belfast.
Okay, so this is an excellent example, and I encourage you to listen closely. He's talking about the IRA fighting against the United Kingdom and fighting against the occupation of Northern Ireland. Let's see.
And they were occupying council properties and so on. And then we have a plane of RAF going to destroy that council property, destroy all of Belfast, flatten it, as one representative said, Gottlieb. The IDF said that, one of the IDF members said that we will flatten it completely. That's what we want to do. We don't care about accuracy, he said. We care about damage. That's what he said. You didn't question her about that.
Okay, so these were government officials, military officials saying that they didn't care about accuracy. They just cared about damage as much as possible within Gaza. And so, again, more war crimes. But what Mohammed Hijab is trying to say here is that if IRA attacks the occupying force of the United Kingdom, does United Kingdom have are they allowed to just completely bomb, completely destroy, say, like a Dublin or a Belfast or something like that.
But anyway, if the RAF were to then go into Belfast and just flatten, as the IDF and these guys want to do, if they want to flatten Belfast with all the white people, I'm going to use the term white, all the white people, council estates living in there, with the excuse that we're doing it because it's proportionate defense to the terrorists. What would you say about that?
Here's what I would say to you.
Is that acceptable or unacceptable?
Here's what I would say to you.
Yeah.
The IRA committed a series of atrocities over numerous decades. They targeted, in their eyes, military and political targets. They usually gave some form of warning, not always.
Okay.
They
were terrorists.
No, they were terrorists.
Sure.
They never, ever went out one day and committed the barbaric slaughter of 1,300. No.
Okay, so Mohammed is trying to come up with a hypothetical here to get Piers Morgan to see what a buffoon he is. And Piers Morgan is just refusing to engage with this scenario. He's saying, what if the IRA did do this? Would it be acceptable for the United Kingdom to completely level, say, a Belfast? And you can see the cowardice of Piers Morgan here, because he knows that you would not be allowed to level Belfast in response to attacking some civilians of the United Kingdom. That would not be a reasonable response. It would be a war crime.
If they did.
No, Mohammed. Here's why it's not irrelevant. They never did.
But if they did, would you accept the RAF to flatten
By the way,
Belfast?
there were outrages committed by
My question is,
the loyalist parliamentarians.
my question is,
Here's my
if
point.
they did, would you think it's
They
acceptable?
never came close to committing an outrage on that scale.
If they did, is it acceptable?
They never
to flatten
went in and kidnapped grandmothers or killed babies.
Okay, so Piers Morgan has obviously heard of a hypothetical before, and Mohammed is trying to engage him in this hypothetical, but Piers Morgan is refusing. And this shows you that it is not just incompetence on Piers Morgan's part, because of the fact that he knows that if he had to engage in this hypothetical, he would recognize that this situation is absurd and that there is no justification for what Israel is doing. You cannot level an entire city like this in response to, say, the IRA committing a terrorist act like that.
Is it acceptable or not?
They believe they were fighting for better or worse, and I believe for worse. And that's why I'm glad peace was found.
But
They believe they were
answer
fighting
my question.
political and military
I'm
targets.
trying to bring it closer to home to
You're
you.
trying to compare apples and oranges.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
It's you that's doing that.
The only comparison that I would say that we saw from October the 7th and what Hamas did is with ISIS.
Excuse me.
It's the only comparison.
Do you mind if I
to bear
let me ask you a
witness.
question? A Palestinian.
And ISIS were taken out, by the way.
You're interrupting me.
No, here's what,
You didn't do this with
I'm going to finish.
Ben Shapiro, which you gave the show to him.
No, hang on. I'm giving you plenty of time.
No, you're not.
I'm giving you plenty. You asked about the analogy of a plane flying over.
Yeah,
targeting
but you didn't answer my question.
But that did happen, Mohammed, with ISIS.
Would you accept
get rid of-
Belfast to be flattened
No, wait a minute.
or not? Yes or
Wait
no?
a minute. It never happened. So the like for like isn't.
It's not a hypothesis. It's
No, it's
hypothetical.
not. It's not. I don't do hypotheticals.
Oh, you don't do hypotheticals.
No, let's deal with reality.
Okay, so that's just a complete cop-out. Piers Morgan obviously knows that that hypothetical would not work in his favor, and so he's not willing to engage with it. And it just goes to show that this attacking of Gaza is just not acceptable.
Reality.
Okay, let's deal with reality.
No, let me finish. Then you can
You don't
answer.
ask a question.
No, here's the reality.
British public can see
Here's the reality,
Yeah.
right? Let's
British
just.
public can see this.
Yeah, they can see it.
Yeah, go on.
Then listen to the
Keep
debate,
going.
right? For what it's worth, I think it's a good debate to have. Right? These are questions many people on the pro-Palestinian side are having. I get it, right? But you're trying to compare what happened on October 7th with the IRA.
No, I'm not.
I'm
I use a
comparing.
hypothetical
Wait a minute, Mark.
question.
I'm comparing it to ISIS, and the way that the world in the end dealt with ISIS actually was to use airstrikes, and many civilians were
There's a
killed.
huge
Many
difference
innocent
between
people
the two,
died.
but
They're not.
You don't understand it because you have no idea of the religion.
What's the difference between what happened on
there's-
October 7th and ISIS?
The difference between the Palestinian resistance is the following. Okay, any kind of thing which has Palestinian resistance attached to it, and ISIS, which is a brand of tekfirism, okay, is that ISIS is just one of many brands of tekfirism, which you don't know what it is, which is a kind of excommunication type heresiological Islamic sect. Okay, so if there's
It's
not,
nihilistic mass murder. That's all they care about.
listen, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying something else.
You agree with me, don't you?
I do, but of course I do, but you're not understanding what I'm saying, so I'm trying to break it.
I am understanding what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that anything.
And I'm not anti-Palestinian, by the way.
Sure, please, but
over the many
you're
years,
not
if
letting me
you bothered to check what I said about it,
Well,
I've always tried to shine a light
Please, let me
on the plight of the
Allow me to
Palestinians.
speak, please, because you're just talking over me. The difference between the two are the following, right? Even if we assume that the killing of combatants in most definitions of terrorism is something which brings someone to be a terrorist, okay? I would say that if that is the case, then the state of Israel breaks that threshold and meets that condition. Because why is Israel not a state terrorist? If their highest officials are admitting that we want to damage and we want damage and not accuracy, answer me this question. Why is the state of Israel, who are illegally occupying Gaza and the West Bank according to international law, and even the ICJ said that, okay, which is, as you know, an organ of the UN, right? So this is international law. They're occupying, they're seizing, they're bombarding, they're indiscriminately killing, and they're blocking the supply lines. They're using white phosphorus. They're doing what we call mowing the grass, which is every couple of years, every few years, they're killing the Palestinian people. I want to understand what differentiates an Israeli in the sky pressing a button, killing the civilians from somebody in any terrorist organization shooting the people. What differentiates?
Israel will say it has a right to defend itself.
So will the terrorists? That's what Osama bin Laden said.
And they will
That's exactly what Osama bin Laden said.
No, it's not though.
Yes, it is. I read his fatwas.
Hamas aren't defending themselves. Bin Laden wasn't defending
define
themselves.
defense.
Bin Laden was trying to kill as many of the enemy as possible.
Let me ask you a question. How could it be that an occupier is defending itself in the first place? The notion that Israel is defending itself is as absurd as the notion that the rapist is defending itself from the victim. Because Israel is the occupier.
You haven't
hold
asked
on.
me, but
Just let me finish. An occupier by international law definition means that they are already in an offensive posture. If they're in an offensive posture, if someone brings you to his...
Okay, so he's completely right here. This is a great point that you should pay attention to. Under international law, if you're occupied, you have the right to use force to fight against that occupation.
Grabs you by the thing, throws you into your bathroom. Yeah? You're in your bathroom, you're screaming, and they're eating food, having a good time. One day you come out of your bathroom, you try and fight one of them. Who's defending who from who?
Mohammed,
Who's self-defense? How can you self-defend?
Okay, so this is a great example where if someone comes into your home, Muhammad is saying, then says that maybe like your kitchen is now theirs. Do you have the right to resist against them taking over and occupying your kitchen? That's essentially the same situation of what's going on in Palestine. I don't think it's as persuasive as his earlier argument about the IRA and the leveling of Belfast or some of the other points that he made, but it is a decent argument here.
When you're occupying, answer this question.
Let me speak.
No, answer the question.
Let me speak.
Answer the question.
Fine, I'm going to speak.
Yeah.
Let me answer.
Yeah.
I believe that Israel's made a number of bad choices.
That's not my question.
Wait, I'm telling you what I think.
You can answer my question.
Telling you what I think.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I don't think Israel's been perfect at all. Right.
I think the moral high ground.
I think a lot of this.
Okay, so Muhammad does point out something really important here is that when he keeps saying, you're not answering my question, you're not answering my question, whenever Piers Morgan would ask a question that was like a yes or no question, Muhammad would give a yes or no and then explain his answer in further detail. That's what you're doing if you're supposed to have a reasoned debate. But Piers Morgan refuses to give a yes or no, particularly heinous in the case of yes or no, is it okay for all these Palestinian children to be murdered? He refused to give a yes or no answer to that type of question. And so Piers Morgan is not even giving a yes and or a no and type of answer. He's just refusing to engage with the person he brought on to debate. And so is this even really a debate at this point? Because Piers Morgan is just not engaging with anything that Muhammad Hijab is saying.
Decisions Israel's taken are wrong. I think Benjamin Netanyahu, by the way, his attempts to usurp the power of the Supreme Court this year in Israel has been a complete disaster.
Do you condemn them from killing civilians or not?
I do not. I will defend them this week.
Yes or no?
Wait.
Yes or no?
I will defend them this week in defense.
Okay, so this is the interesting thing here is Piers Morgan essentially used a hypothetical earlier when he was saying, do you condemn Hamas beheading babies? That was obviously, there's no evidence for it, so it is a hypothetical. And Muhammad said, yes, of course, if they're murdering innocent babies, then yes, all babies are innocent, obviously. But if they're murdering babies, then innocent civilians, then yes, I condemn that if there's evidence for that. Whereas here, Piers Morgan is saying that he needs to see evidence before he can condemn something similar being happening in the reverse.
Defending themselves against one of the worst terror attacks ever.
So you can kill civilians for that?
You can target Hamas.
Can you target? No, hold on.
And if Hamas, the controlling governing ruling body in Gaza, hide amongst the public.
This is a false
members of the public die.
This, you're talking about fallacies. This is called the Martin Bailey fallacy, which is that you're trying to defend one controversial idea by using another. Martin Bailey fallacy. You can check out on your own time. The point is this. I'm not asking you whether Israel has a right to defend itself. We've already said that the logical and legal impossibility of an occupying power according to international law.
Okay, so worth emphasizing here, Muhammad is saying something that's completely true. Israel has no possibility of defending itself. It's not possible to defend yourself while you are breaking into someone's home. There's no such thing as self-defense when you are breaking into someone else's house, when you're an occupying force. That's under international law. This is a great point that I just wanted to emphasize here.
Of actually defending itself, because it's already in an offensive posture. Now I'm saying this. If it is the case, you're just saying it's defending itself against Hamas. Is the only way to defend itself against Hamas by dropping bombs in the most densely populated area, one of the most densely populated areas in the world? Is that the only way? It's a false dichotomy, great false dichotomy. They can do surgery, they can do it. They can go in and they can target.
We're going to take a short break. Actually, I'm going to keep you here. I want to finish this. I want to give you the time. I think it's an important debate, an important conversation.
Well, you have to answer my questions.
I will. We'll come back. Yeah, but actually, you have to answer mine. It's my show. Actually,
I can answer
for the record, you can ask me questions you want, but I'll tell you what I think.
I've answered all your
questions. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and we're going to finish with a few more minutes. Okay. Welcome back to Piers Morgan says, well, Mohammed Hijab is still with me. We've had a lively debate. I knew it would be a lively debate. This is a very important issue. It's a very passionate issue. People on both sides. If I tweet about anything, doesn't matter what I say. One side, if I'm even remotely sympathetic to them, the other side, poor abuse and vice versa and so on. Let's try and cut through it all and get to what happens here. How do we find peace in the Middle East? I've been covering Israel-Palestine since I've been a journalist, 3 decades. And it seems to me we're as far away now as we've ever been. How do you think we get to a place?
You'll be surprised. Look, even Hamas, some 4 or 5 years ago, they even agreed to the 1967 lines, the borders. And what you have to understand, that this cannot be scapegoated on Hamas, because before Hamas' existence, this was still going on. This was going on before Israel's existence.
Would you believe in a two-state solution?
No, I believe in... Look, even Hamas was proposing a two-state solution.
Would you believe in it?
Look, there's advantages and disadvantages. This is a different... I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult one.
Could you imagine 2 states next to each other living in peace? Palestine, Israel.
Look, it's a possibility. I mean, as I say, even Hamas was saying that that's a possibility. I mean, this was 4 years ago. But what I want to bring to your attention is that nothing can happen if the international body or the UN becomes a toothless agency. In 2018 to 19, when actually 221 people were killed on a peaceful protest in Gaza. It was called the Great March of Gaza. 220 people died. Hamas didn't shoot a bullet. No rocket was launched, yeah? So 220 people died, and this is even mentioned by the UN and these kind of agencies. They tried to bring it up, the Palestinian Authority, they tried to bring this up to what we call the ICJ, which is part of the UN, okay? What happened to the Donald Trump administration? They threatened to freeze the assets of the ICJ, which tells you the following. What are the Palestinian people to do? Because the fact of the matter is, if they try and bring it up...
Let me ask you.
Let me finish the point. If they try and bring it up...
We're running out of time, that's why I'm jumping in.
If they try and bring it up to international law, it's thwarted.
I do think international law matters. Sure. I just don't believe that any peace can be achieved with Hamas in charge. Do you?
Before Hamas...
Now, after what happened last weekend.
Forget about last weekend.
Can't forget about last weekend.
No, it's not. Before last weekend, before Hamas in 1987, this was still going on.
But not on this scale.
Worse.
No, it wasn't as bad as this.
What are you talking about?
What happened on which
that shows
was the single worst assault on a populace since 9/11? It was.
Yom Kippur was 2,000 people died, by the way. 1973. That's false.
In one day?
In one day, I don't know, about 600 people died in one day.
Mohammed, I've got to leave. Let me run out of time. I gave you more time than I planned to. I hope you appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming in.
So just shocking what we saw here, because again, I'd like to emphasize this. It's not Piers Morgan being incompetent. Sure, he's obviously incompetent too, but it is a fact that when he was not willing to engage with, say, things like the IRA example, he was showing that he actually did not really agree with Israel. He was only saying that he agreed with Israel because, I don't know, maybe that's where he's getting paid from. Maybe he has a vested interest in it. But the IRA example in particular is kind of the key for me, which was he knew that example would not fly, would not be persuasive in another context. And so he refused to engage with hypotheticals, even though his entire premise, his entire argument for the first few minutes were hypotheticals. It was, well, what if Hamas is beheading babies? What if they are raping people? Those were things that were given without evidence, and so they were hypothetical. We aren't sure if they were actually true. And so Piers Morgan would bring up hypotheticals when it benefited Israel, but would not bring up hypotheticals when it benefited Palestine and human rights. And so on this channel, we believe Palestine should be free from the river to the sea. And so free Palestine. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us in the algorithm on both YouTube and Rumble. Please subscribe to our channel for more content on, again, both YouTube and Rumble. And please leave us a comment. I love reading all of your comments, any comments, questions, critiques, concerns, etc., etc. I read all of them and I respond when necessary. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.